Captain Jake Morrison stood at the large window of his quarters aboard Nexus Prime, watching stars drift past in the distance. The space station was enormous, bigger than any city on Earth. It spun slowly in orbit around a yellow star, home to no one but perfect for everyone. This was where the galaxy made its decisions, where hundreds of different alien species came together to talk, trade, and sometimes argue. Jake was 42 years old, with gray hair starting to show at his temples. He had spent 20 years in Earth's space fleet, fighting pirates and protecting trade ships. His uniform was neat and clean, decorated with medals he never talked about. Today he wore his best dress uniform because today was important. Today humanity would finally get its chance to join the Galactic Council as full members. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. Commander Ryan Blake walked in, carrying a data pad. Ryan was younger than Jake, only 35, but just as experienced. He had sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, and a quick smile that could put anyone at ease. Right now, though, he looked worried. "The vote is in 3 hours," Ryan said, handing Jake the data pad. "Dr. Grant wanted you to see the latest numbers." Jake looked at the screen. Numbers and charts filled the display, showing predictions about how different alien species might vote. Most of it looked good. Most, but not all. He frowned at one particular section. "The Viridians are still uncertain," Jake said. "More than uncertain," Ryan replied. "Our intelligence suggests they might vote against us. We just don't know why." The Viridians were an old race, one of the oldest in the galaxy. They looked like giant lizards walking on 2 legs with scales that shimmered green and gold. They had been members of the Galactic Council for thousands of years. Their opinion mattered. If they voted against humanity, others might follow. Jake handed the data pad back. "Where's Dr. Grant now?" "In the diplomatic prep room with Ambassador Phillips. They're going over the speech one last time." Dr. Lisa Grant was Earth's chief diplomat and one of the smartest people Jake had ever met. She was 38 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a tight bun and glasses that made her look like a teacher. She had spent years studying alien languages and cultures, preparing for this moment. She believed with all her heart that humans belonged among the stars, working with other species to make the galaxy better. Ambassador Kate Phillips was even more dedicated. At 55, she had given up a comfortable retirement to lead Earth's diplomatic mission. She had been a leader at the United Nations before first contact with aliens changed everything. Now she carried the hopes of 8 billion humans on her shoulders. "Let's go," Jake said. "I want to check the security one more time before the session starts." They walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime. The station was built to accommodate every kind of alien body, so the hallways were wide and tall. Some sections had different gravity, some had different air, some even had water for species that lived in the ocean. Aliens of every shape and size passed by. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, some on 4 or 6 or 8. Some flew, some crawled, some floated. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that Jake still had trouble understanding how they moved or thought. 2 hours later, Jake stood in the security booth overlooking the council chamber. The chamber was a massive circular room with seats rising up in tiers, like an ancient Roman arena. At the bottom was the speaking floor, where ambassadors would present their cases. High above, a dome showed the stars outside, reminding everyone that they were all travelers in the same universe. The seats were filling up. Aliens of every type took their places, talking in hundreds of languages. Translation devices handled most of the work, turning alien words into something each listener could understand. The noise was incredible, a mixture of chirps, growls, whistles, and sounds that had no human equivalent. Ryan stood beside Jake, scanning the crowd with his trained eye. "There," he said, pointing to a section on the left. "The Viridian delegation." Jake looked where Ryan pointed. He saw High Chancellor Vexthar, leader of the Viridian Empire. The alien was huge, nearly 8 feet tall, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow. He sat very still, his face showing no emotion. Around him were other Viridians, all wearing official robes marked with symbols of their rank. "He looks confident," Jake muttered. "Too confident," Ryan agreed. "I don't like it." A deep gong sounded and the chamber fell silent. The council speaker, an ancient alien that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light, drifted to the center of the speaking floor. Its voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into every language. "The Council recognizes the petition of Earth for full membership status. Ambassador Kate Phillips will now present humanity's case. Jake watched as Ambassador Phillips walked onto the speaking floor. She looked small down there, one human woman facing representatives of 400 alien species. But she walked with her head high, confident and proud. Dr. Grant stood in the wings, ready to help if needed. Ambassador Phillips began to speak. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying throughout the chamber. She talked about humanity's achievements, about the progress they had made since first contact 56 years ago. She spoke of human art and music, of human science and exploration, of the desire to learn from other species and share what humans knew. She painted a picture of a young species eager to join the galactic community and contribute to its success. Jake felt proud listening to her. She was good at this, making humanity sound worthy without sounding boastful. Many aliens in the chamber nodded or made gestures that their translators said meant approval. But then High Chancellor Vexthar stood up. The chamber fell silent again. When a representative of such an old and powerful species chose to speak, everyone listened. The Viridian Empire requests permission to present counter-evidence, Vexthar said. His voice was deep and cold like stones grinding together. The speaker floated higher. Permission granted. Jake felt his stomach tighten. Counter-evidence? What counter-evidence? Vexthar activated a holographic display that appeared in the center of the chamber. Images and data began to scroll past, visible to everyone. The High Chancellor began to speak, and with each word, Jake's worry grew into dread. The Viridian Empire has conducted a comprehensive analysis of humanity, Vexthar said. Our conclusion is that this species does not meet the standards required for council membership. In fact, we propose that humans should be classified as a Class 3 inferior species. A wave of shock ran through the chamber. Aliens turned to each other, talking in surprised tones. On the speaking floor, Ambassador Phillips looked like she had been struck. Even Dr. Grant, normally so composed, showed open surprise. Class 3 inferior species. Jake knew what that meant. He had studied the Council's classification system. Inferior species had limited rights. They were restricted to small areas of space. They could not access most trade routes. They could not use advanced technologies. They were essentially treated as children, incapable of taking care of themselves. Vexthar continued, displaying more data. Observe the evidence. Humans have a natural lifespan of less than 100 years, far below the galactic average of 400. Their sensory capabilities are limited compared to most species. They can barely see in the dark, their hearing is weak. They have almost no natural defenses. They are fragile, easily injured, susceptible to thousands of diseases. The High Chancellor showed images of human history, wars, conflicts, environmental damage. They have spent most of their existence fighting among themselves. Even now, they are not truly united. Their technology is primitive by our standards. Their faster-than-light drives are inefficient and dangerous. They have been in space for less than 300 years, a mere blink of time. More images appeared comparing humans to other species. Every comparison made humans look weak, stupid, or violent. Vexthar had clearly spent a long time preparing this presentation. It was thorough and damaging. For their own protection and the stability of the galaxy, Vexthar concluded, the Viridian Empire moves that humanity be classified as inferior and restricted to their current territory. We suggest a review in 500 years to determine if they have matured sufficiently. 500 years. To the long-lived aliens in the Council, that might not seem like much time. But for humans whose grandparents had been alive during first contact, it might as well be forever. The speaker called for discussion. Several ambassadors spoke, some defending humanity, some agreeing with the Viridians. Jake watched the debate with growing anger. They were talking about his species like they were animals in a zoo, deciding whether humans were smart enough to be trusted. Ambassador Phillips fought back hard. She challenged every point Vexthar had made, explaining that human lifespan was increasing with medical advances, that what humans lacked in natural abilities they made up for with tools and intelligence, that their conflicts had made them stronger and more united. But Jake could see it was not enough. The damage had been done. Finally, the speaker called for a vote. The chamber fell silent. One by one, species cast their votes. The holographic display kept count. Jake watched the numbers climb, his heart sinking with each vote cast against humanity. The conference room aboard the Valiant was small but secure. Jake Morrison sat at the head of the table with his senior officers around him. Ambassador Phillips sat to his right, Dr. Lisa Grant to his left. Commander Ryan Blake stood near a display screen, showing tactical maps of human space. The mood in the room was tense. "Let me make sure I understand this," Ambassador Phillips said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "The Viridians spent months preparing that presentation. They falsified data, manipulated images, and deliberately made us look as bad as possible, and now they're sending a fleet to take our colonies." "That's what it looks like," Ryan confirmed. He touched the screen and the display zoomed in on a section of space near human territory. Red markers showed Viridian ship positions. 120 warships. They're calling it a training exercise, but the formation is all wrong for training. This is an invasion force. Dr. Grant studied the map with worry in her eyes. "Which colony are they targeting?" "New Terra," Ryan said. "It's our largest colony outside Earth's solar system. 2 million people, rich in resources, strategically located near several major trade routes." Jake leaned back in his chair, thinking hard. New Terra was important, but it was also lightly defended. The colony had mining equipment, farms, schools, and homes. It did not have a large military presence. Earth's fleet could get there in time, but they would be outnumbered at least 10-1. "We can't win a straight fight," Jake said flatly. "Their ships are bigger, their weapons more advanced, and they have us outnumbered. If we meet them head-on, we lose, so what do we do?" Ambassador Phillips asked. "Just let them take our people?" "No," Jake said firmly. "We fight, but not the way they expect." Ryan smiled slightly. He knew that look on Jake's face. It was the look he got when he had an idea, usually a crazy one that somehow worked. Dr. Grant pulled up another screen, this one showing the Viridian presentation from the Council. "Look at this. They said we were inferior because of our biology, our technology, our short history, but they made a mistake. They only looked at what we are, not at what we can do." "What do you mean?" Ambassador Phillips asked. "They're right that we're not as strong or as long-lived as them," Dr. Grant explained. "Our ships aren't as advanced." But they completely missed the point. Humans don't survive because we're the strongest or the smartest. We survive because we adapt. We find solutions to problems that others don't even see as solvable. Jake nodded slowly. The Viridians have been the dominant power for thousands of years. They fight the same way they always have, with overwhelming force and superior technology. They expect everyone else to fight the same way. But we won't, Ryan finished the thought. We'll fight our way. Guerrilla tactics. Hit and run. Make them uncertain, confused, off balance. For the first time since the council vote, Ambassador Phillips smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was determined. "Tell me more." Over the next hour, they developed a plan. It was risky and required perfect timing, but it had a chance of working. The key was to avoid direct confrontation while making the Viridian fleet think they were facing a much larger force than they actually were. Ryan would lead strike teams to attack Viridian supply lines and communication relays. Small, fast ships could slip past their defenses and cause chaos without ever engaging in direct combat. Meanwhile, Dr. Grant would begin a psychological campaign, broadcasting messages to the Viridian fleet, questioning the morality and legality of their mission. Jake would coordinate everything from the Valiant, positioning their limited military forces to maximum effect. They would use every trick in the book: electronic warfare, false signals, dummy targets, anything to make the Viridians see threats that were not there. As they finalized the details, Jake's communication device beeped. An incoming message, encrypted and marked urgent. He opened it and read quickly, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "What is it?" Ryan asked. "A meeting request," Jake said slowly, "from someone calling themselves a friend of humanity. They want to meet in person in 1 hour at Dock 17. "It could be a trap," Ryan warned. "It could be," Jake agreed. "But right now we need all the help we can get. I'll take a security team. If it's a trap, we'll deal with it." An hour later, Jake stood in Dock 17 with 4 armed guards. The dock was in a less busy section of Nexus Prime, away from the main traffic. Ships came and went here, mostly cargo vessels and private craft. It was quiet and relatively private. A small ship landed, sleek and smooth with no visible weapons. The hatch opened, and an insect-like alien emerged. Jake recognized her immediately. It was the same alien who had made that gesture in the council chamber. The one with the large compound eyes and thin chitinous body. The alien approached slowly, her 4 arms held out to show she carried no weapons. When she spoke, her voice came through a translator device that rendered her clicking sounds into English. "Captain Morrison," she said. "Thank you for coming. My name is Clicktar. I represent the Chitauri Hive Collective." Jake remembered the Chitauri from the Council records. They were an insectoid species, organized in hive structures but with individual personalities. They had been members of the Council for about 200 years, not nearly as long as species like the Viridians. "Why did you want to meet?" Jake asked cautiously. Clicktar's antennae moved in what might have been a gesture of sympathy. "Because 200 years ago the Council declared my people inferior. Just like they did to you today." Jake felt a shock of recognition. "You were classified as inferior?" "Yes, the older species said we were too different, too alien in our thinking. They said we could not be trusted because we thought as a collective. It took us 50 years to prove them wrong." Clicktar moved closer. "I watched your ambassador speak today. I saw the passion, the intelligence, the determination. I saw what the Council refused to see, that humanity has something special." "Thank you," Jake said. "But why tell me this now?" "Because I want to help," Clicktar said simply. "The Viridian fleet movements are not authorized by the full Council. High Chancellor Vexthar is acting on his own, hoping to present the Council with a completed action before anyone can stop him. But if you can hold them off, if you can make this difficult for him, other Council members might intervene." She produced a data device and handed it to Jake. "This contains information about Viridian fleet tactics, communication codes, and ship vulnerabilities. Everything my intelligence services have gathered." "Use it well." Jake took the device, hardly believing what he was hearing. "Why would you risk this?" "If the Viridians find out you helped us, there could be consequences." Clicktar's antennae moved again. "Because someone helped us when we needed it. Because the galaxy should be big enough for all kinds of intelligence, not just the kinds that the old powers approve of. And because," she added with what might have been a smile, "I think you are going to surprise everyone. I want to be on the right side when you do." Before Jake could respond, Clicktar turned to leave, but she paused at the hatch of her ship. "One more thing, Captain. You should know that not all Council members supported today's vote. Some abstained because they were uncertain. Others voted yes because they were pressured. If you can show them that humanity deserves respect, minds can be changed. The Council is not as unified as it appears." Then she was gone, her ship lifting off silently and disappearing into the traffic patterns around the station. Back aboard the Valiant, Jake called his team together again. He showed them the data device Clicktar had given him. Ryan immediately began analyzing the information, his eyes growing wider with each file he opened. "This is incredible," Ryan breathed. Detailed schematics of their ships, communication protocols, even the personal files of some of their commanders. "With this information, we can do more than just harass them. We can actually hurt them." Dr. Grant was looking at a different section of the data. "Look at this. The Viridian fleet relies heavily on centralized command and control. Their ships are networked together through quantum communication links. If we could disrupt that network even temporarily, it would cause massive confusion." Jake felt hope stirring for the first time since the Council vote. They still faced terrible odds, but now they had a real chance. "All right. Here's what we're going to do. Ryan, I want you to put together teams for surgical strikes on their communication relays. Use our fastest ships and best pilots." "On it," Ryan said, already making notes. "Dr. Grant, start preparing those psychological broadcasts. But use this information to make them more effective. Target specific ships, specific commanders. Make them question their orders and their leaders." Dr. Grant nodded. "I can do that. If I can create enough doubt, some of them might refuse to fight." Ambassador Phillips spoke up. "And what about the Council?" Clicktar said some members were uncertain. "Maybe we can use that." "Good idea," Jake agreed. "Start reaching out quietly to the species that abstained from the vote. Don't ask for help directly. Just make sure they know what's really happening. Let them see that this isn't a legitimate Council action. It's one species trying to grab power." Over the next 24 hours, everyone worked without rest. Ryan assembled 3 strike teams, each with 5 fast attack ships. They practiced maneuvers, studied the Viridian data, and prepared for hit. The colony of New Terra looked peaceful from orbit. The planet was green and blue, covered with forests and oceans that reminded people of Earth. Cities dotted the continents, connected by roads and railways. Farms spread across the fertile valleys. 2 million people lived here, building new lives among the stars. They had no idea that death was coming toward them. High Chancellor Vexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, watching New Terra grow larger on the view screen. Around his ship, 119 other Viridian warships maintained perfect formation. It was an impressive sight, a display of power that should have made any inferior species surrender immediately. But the humans had not surrendered. Instead, they had fought back in the most annoying way possible. His fleet had been harassed for the past 24 hours by ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. His communication networks kept failing. His supply lines were disrupted. False sensor readings had his commanders jumping at shadows. Vexthar was not worried, though. These were just minor irritations. The humans were like insects biting at a giant, annoying but ultimately harmless. Once his fleet reached New Terra and established control, these little attacks would stop. The humans would see the futility of resistance and accept their inferior status. "Status report," he commanded. His tactical officer, a younger Viridian named Corval, consulted his displays. "We will reach orbit in 6 hours. The human colony has refused all communication attempts. Our sensors detect minimal military presence, mostly civilian infrastructure. The asteroid field near the planet shows unusual activity, but nothing that poses a threat." "What kind of unusual activity?" Vexthar asked. "Mining operations mostly. The humans have been extracting resources from the asteroids. Some movement of mining equipment, nothing more." Vexthar dismissed it with a wave of his clawed hand. Miners were not warriors. Mining equipment was not a weapon. The humans were desperate, but desperation alone could not stop his fleet. What he did not know was that the mining equipment had been secretly modified over the past weeks. Thousands of asteroids now had small thrusters attached to them. Explosive charges had been planted in carefully calculated positions. The entire asteroid field had become a massive trap, and the Viridian fleet was flying straight into it. On the surface of New Terra, Ambassador Kate Phillips stood in the colony's command center. Large screens showed the approaching Viridian fleet, red markers growing steadily closer. Around her, military officers and civilian leaders waited tensely. Everyone knew what was at stake. Dr. Lisa Grant sat at a communication station, her fingers moving across controls. She was preparing the final broadcast, the one that would go out to the entire galaxy. Camera drones hovered nearby, ready to transmit everything that was about to happen to billions of watching aliens. Ambassador Phillips looked at the countdown timer. 5 hours and 30 minutes. She took a deep breath and activated the public address system that would broadcast her words to every human on the planet. "People of New Terra," she began, her voice steady and calm. "You all know what's coming. The Viridian Empire believes they can take our world because the Galactic Council declared us inferior. They think we will surrender without a fight. They are wrong." She paused, looking at the faces around her, young and old, people who had come to this world seeking a better life. "We did not come to the stars to bow before tyrants. We came here to build, to grow, to show the galaxy what humanity can achieve. Today we will show them something else. We will show them that underestimating humans is a mistake they will never forget." On board the Valiant, Captain Jake Morrison monitored multiple data streams simultaneously. His ship hung in space well away from the battle zone. Coordinated strike teams managed resources and prepared for the critical moment when everything would come together or fall apart. Commander Ryan Blake's face appeared on one screen. His fighter squadron was hidden in the asteroid field, waiting for the signal. "All teams in position, Captain." "The miners are ready. Just give the word." "Not yet," Jake said, watching the Viridian fleet approach. "Let them get closer. Let them feel confident." The hours crawled by. The Viridian fleet moved inexorably toward New Terra, their formation perfect, their weapons charged, their confidence absolute. Vexthar had done this before, conquered worlds and crushed resistance. This would be no different. When the fleet was 1 hour from orbit, Vexthar opened a communication channel to the planet. His scaled face filled screens across New Terra, his yellow eyes cold and imperious. "Humans of New Terra," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "The Galactic Council has determined that your species requires protection and guidance. You will surrender control of this colony to the Viridian Empire. Your people will be relocated to designated areas. Your resources will be managed by those more capable. Resistance is pointless. You have 1 hour to comply. Ambassador Phillips stepped in front of the cameras in the command center. Her response would be broadcast not just to the Viridian fleet, but to the entire galaxy. News networks across hundreds of worlds were watching, waiting to see if humanity would meekly surrender. "High Chancellor Vexithar," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You come to our world uninvited. You claim authority you do not have. You demand surrender from people who have done nothing wrong. Let me tell you something about humans. We do not surrender to bullies. We do not accept chains. And we do not forget those who try to enslave us." She stepped closer to the camera. "You declared us inferior. You said we were weak, primitive, unworthy of respect. Today we will show you the truth. Today, you will learn why underestimating humanity is the last mistake you will ever make." Vexithar's expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed. "Very well. You have chosen your fate." He closed the channel and turned to his tactical officer. "All ships advance to attack positions. Prepare to bombard military targets on the surface. Show these inferior creatures the price of defiance." The Viridian fleet began to accelerate, moving through the asteroid field toward the planet. The formation tightened as they navigated through the floating rocks, massive warships moving with practiced precision. On the Valiant, Jake watched the enemy fleet enter the kill zone. Every asteroid with attached equipment was now armed and ready. Thousands of improvised weapons surrounded the Viridians, and they did not even know it. "Now," Jake said quietly. The asteroid field exploded into chaos. Thousands of asteroids activated simultaneously. Thrusters fired, sending massive rocks hurtling toward the Viridian ships. Explosive charges detonated, breaking larger asteroids into deadly fragments that spread in all directions. The careful formation that Vexthar was so proud of became a death trap as his ships found themselves in a storm of debris, moving at incredible speeds. Alarms screamed on the bridge of the Dominator. Korval shouted reports as fast as he could read them. "Incoming projectiles from all directions. Multiple impacts across the fleet. Ships reporting damage." Vexthar gripped the arms of his command chair as his flagship shuddered from impacts. On the view screen, he saw his perfect fleet breaking apart. Ships scattered, trying to avoid the asteroids, colliding with each other in the confusion. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were inferior. They did not have the technology or the tactics to challenge a Viridian fleet, but they were not fighting with technology alone. They were fighting with creativity, turning the very environment against their enemies. The asteroids were not advanced weapons. They were just rocks with thrusters and explosives. But in sufficient numbers, moving with coordinated timing, they were devastating. Then Ryan Blake's fighter squadron emerged from hiding. Small, agile ships darted through the chaos like sharks in a feeding frenzy. They did not try to fight the massive Viridian warships directly. Instead, they targeted specific systems with surgical precision, weapons arrays, sensor clusters, communication antennas, engine manifolds. The Chitauri intelligence had been invaluable. Ryan's pilots knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum disruption with minimum effort. A well-placed shot could disable a weapon system that would take hours to repair. A precise strike could blind a ship's sensors, leaving it helpless in the chaos. On the Dominator's bridge, panic was setting in. Korval's reports became increasingly desperate. "Communication network is down. Multiple ships not responding. The destroyer just lost main power." The Conqueror reports critical damage to their weapons array. "Return fire," Vexthar roared. "Destroy those fighters!" But firing in the asteroid field was nearly impossible. Every shot risked hitting friendly ships or causing more asteroids to explode. The human fighters were too small and too fast, appearing for seconds to fire before vanishing back into the chaos. The Viridian gunners, trained for ship-to-ship combat in open space, could not track these darting targets. Ryan's voice came through Jake's communicator, breathless and excited. "You should see it from here, Captain. They don't know which way is up. Half their fleet is dead in the water, and the other half is too confused to fight effectively. Don't get overconfident," Jake warned. "They still have numbers and firepower. Stay focused on the mission." Dr. Grant's voice cut in. "Captain, the Galactic news networks are going crazy. Everyone is watching this. The broadcasts are being shared across." The council chamber on Nexus Prime had never been so crowded. Every seat was filled, and more aliens stood in the aisles and galleries. The battle at New Terra had been broadcast live across the galaxy. Billions of beings on hundreds of worlds had watched humanity defeat one of the most powerful fleets in known space. Now everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Ambassador Kate Phillips stood on the speaking floor once again. This time she was not alone. Dr. Lisa Grant stood beside her, along with Captain Jake Morrison in his formal uniform. The entire human delegation was present, and behind them on screens were representatives from New Terra and Earth itself. The council speaker, the floating jellyfish-like being of light, addressed the assembly. Its voice echoed through the vast chamber. We convene this emergency session to address the recent events at New Terra. Ambassador Phillips, you requested this hearing. You may speak. Phillips stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. Everything they had fought for came down to this moment. 3 days ago, Phillips began, this council declared humanity an inferior species. You said we lacked the capability to stand as equals among the stars. You restricted us to a small portion of space and denied us the rights of full membership. Within hours of that vote, the Viridian Empire launched a military operation to annex our largest colony. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Many had suspected the connection, but Phillips was stating it plainly. You all watched what happened, Phillips continued. You saw how we defended ourselves, not with superior technology or overwhelming force, but with intelligence, creativity, and determination. We proved that being inferior in your estimation does not make us inferior, in fact. Dr. Grant activated a holographic display. Data and images appeared in the center of the chamber. But there is something you need to know, something that goes far beyond one battle. We have discovered evidence that the Viridian classification of humanity was not based on honest assessment. It was deliberate manipulation. The chamber fell silent. This was a serious accusation. Dr. Grant showed internal Viridian government communications that had been leaked by sympathetic sources. Messages discussing the rich resources in human space, plans to classify humanity as inferior specifically to justify annexation, orders to scientific teams to emphasize negative aspects and hide positive findings in their reports. The presentation that High Chancellor Vexthar gave this council was designed to deceive you, Dr. Grant said. Every image was chosen to make us look primitive. Every comparison was calculated to make us seem weak. Data that showed human achievements was deliberately excluded. More evidence appeared. Reports from Viridian scientists who had been pressured to change their findings. Testimony from government officials who had raised concerns and been silenced. Financial records showing which council members had been promised portions of human territory in exchange for their votes. The chamber erupted. Aliens turned to each other in shock and anger. Several ambassadors immediately stood up demanding to speak. The council speaker had to call for order multiple times before the noise died down. One of the ambassadors who had voted for human classification stood up, his face showing distress. He was a member of a species called the Talvon, who looked like tall, thin birds with colorful feathers. If this is true, then the vote was based on false information. The entire classification must be reconsidered. Another ambassador, this one from a species that had abstained from voting, spoke up. More than that, if council members were bribed, this is corruption at the highest level. There must be an investigation. The speaker raised its glowing appendages for silence. Ambassador Phillips, these are grave accusations. How did you obtain this information? Before Phillips could answer, a new voice rang out. I can answer that question. Kliktar walked onto the speaking floor. The Chitauri representative moved with confidence, her 4 arms spread in a gesture of honesty. Much of this information came from Chitauri intelligence services. We have been monitoring the Viridian Empire's activities for some time, concerned about their growing aggression. When we saw what they were planning for humanity, we knew we had to act. A Viridian ambassador, not Vexithar but a younger one named Sarik, stood up. Her scales were lighter green than the High Chancellor's and her manner less arrogant. The Chitauri representative speaks truth. I'm ashamed to say that elements within my own government have acted dishonorably. High Chancellor Vexthar has been removed from his position. Our new government wishes to formally apologize to humanity and to this council for the deception. The chamber buzzed with shocked conversation. A change of government in the Viridian Empire was huge news. They were one of the oldest and most stable civilizations in the galaxy. Sarik continued, her voice heavy with emotion. What happened at New Terra was not just a military defeat. It was a lesson. My people have grown arrogant over the millennia. We believed that age and tradition gave us the right to judge others. We forgot that every species has value, that different does not mean inferior. She turned to face the human delegation directly. Ambassador Phillips, Captain Morrison, Dr. Grant, on behalf of the Viridian people, I offer our sincere apology. You responded to our aggression not with revenge but with mercy. You could have destroyed our fleet, but you offered us safe passage home. This is the mark of a truly advanced civilization. Phillips stepped forward and extended her hand. It was a human gesture, but its meaning was clear. Sarek looked at the offered hand, then slowly reached out and grasped it with her clawed hand. The gesture was captured by thousands of cameras and would become one of the most famous images in galactic history. But Phillips was not finished. She turned back to address the full council. We accept the Viridian apology, but this situation reveals a deeper problem. The classification system itself is flawed. It measures species based on arbitrary standards that reflect the biases of whoever is doing the measuring. Dr. Grant took over, her voice carrying the passion of a scientist who had found a fundamental truth. Consider what the classification system values: long lifespan, advanced technology, physical capabilities, ancient heritage. But are these really the measures of a species' worth? What about creativity, adaptability, the ability to cooperate across differences, the moral courage to show mercy to enemies? She displayed more data, this time showing comparisons between many different species. The current system creates a hierarchy that benefits old, established civilizations while discriminating against younger species. It discourages diversity of thought and approach. It tells entire civilizations that they are not good enough simply because they are different. Phillips spoke again. We propose a complete reform of the classification system. Instead of ranking species as superior or inferior, we should recognize that different species have different strengths. Instead of restricting younger civilizations, we should help them develop. Instead of creating barriers, we should build bridges. She outlined a new framework: independent review boards to prevent political manipulation, clear criteria based on demonstrable capability rather than biological characteristics, protection for species under evaluation, regular review and appeal processes. Most importantly, recognition that diversity itself was valuable, that the galaxy was stronger when it included many different types of intelligence and capability. The chamber listened in silence. Many ambassadors nodded as Philip spoke. She was not just defending humanity. She was proposing changes that would benefit every species, especially those that had been marginalized or ignored. When she finished, the speaker floated higher. The Council will consider these proposals carefully. But first, we must address the immediate issue. The classification of humanity was based on false information and may have been influenced by corruption. This cannot stand. One of the oldest ambassadors, representing a species that had been part of the Council since its founding, stood up. He looked like a living tree, his body covered in bark-like skin with branches growing from his head. His voice was slow and deep like wind through ancient forests. I voted to classify humanity as inferior, he said. I did so because I trusted the information presented. I believed the Viridians were acting in good faith. I was wrong. The events at New Terra have shown that humanity possesses qualities we should admire, not restrict. I move that the classification be reversed immediately. Another ambassador seconded the motion. Then another. Soon ambassadors from all over the chamber were standing, expressing support. Many admitted they had been pressured or misled. Others said they had abstained because something felt wrong about the whole process. A few who had voted against the classification from the beginning spoke about being ignored or dismissed. The tide had turned completely. Where 3 days ago the Council had been overwhelmingly against humanity, now they were overwhelmingly in favor. The speaker called for a vote. All those in favor of reversing the classification of humanity as an inferior species? Lights appeared across the chamber as ambassadors cast their votes. Jake watched the count climb, his heart pounding. When the final tally appeared, it showed 389 votes in favor of reversing the classification. Only 11 voted against, 0 abstentions. 1 year later, Captain Jake Morrison stood on New Terra once again. The planet had changed remarkably in 12 months. New buildings rose into the sky, constructed with a mixture of human engineering and alien technology. Ships from a dozen different species came and went from the expanded spaceport. Aliens walked the streets alongside humans, shopping in markets, eating in restaurants, conducting business. What had almost been a battlefield was now a symbol of cooperation between species. Jake walked through a memorial park that had been built on the edge of the city. 3 monuments stood there, each one dedicated to a human pilot who had died defending the colony. They were the only casualties humanity had suffered in the battle. 3 brave souls who had sacrificed themselves so others could live. He placed his hand on one of the monuments, made of stone quarried from New Terra itself. The pilot's name was carved deep into the rock, along with the words that had become the memorial's motto. They stood between tyranny and freedom won. They would be proud of what you accomplished. Captain. Jake turned to see Ambassador Kate Phillips approaching. She looked different now, more relaxed and confident. The weight she had carried before the council vote seemed to have lifted. She wore new robes marking her position as a senior council mediator, one of the highest diplomatic positions in the galaxy. I like to visit when I'm on New Terra, Jake said, gesturing to the monuments. Reminds me why we fight. Not for glory or conquest, but to protect people and their right to live free. Phillips nodded. That's why the council offered you command of the new Joint Defense Force. They trust you to use military power wisely. Jake had been promoted to admiral after the battle. Now he commanded a fleet of ships from multiple species, dedicated to protecting vulnerable worlds from exploitation. It was a new concept in galactic politics, a military force that served all species equally rather than any single government. Ryan Blake was his chief of staff, helping to integrate different military traditions into a cohesive whole. How are the reforms going? Jake asked as they walked through the park. Phillips smiled. Better than expected. The Classification Review Commission has already upgraded the status of 6 species that were previously classified as inferior. 3 more are under review. The new system focuses on capability and potential, rather than arbitrary biological standards. And the old guard? The species that benefited from the old system? Some resisted at first, Phillips admitted, but most have come around. They saw what happened when arrogance and prejudice went unchecked. The Viridian Empire nearly destroyed itself through Vexthar's actions. Other species learned from that example. They walked in silence for a moment, enjoying the peaceful day. Children played in the park, human and alien alike, their laughter a universal sound. Jake thought about how much had changed in such a short time. A year ago, these species might not have spoken to each other. Now their children played together. I got a message from Dr. Grant yesterday, Phillips said. She's on the other side of the galaxy, helping mediate a dispute between 2 species that have been enemies for centuries. Jake smiled. Dr. Lisa Grant had become Earth's first permanent council representative, a newly created position that gave humanity a voice in day-to-day council affairs. She traveled constantly, using the same principles that had worked for humanity to help other species resolve their conflicts. Is it working? He asked. She says they're making progress. Both sides are talking now, at least. That's more than they were doing 6 months ago. Phillips paused. She wanted me to tell you something. She said the methods we used at New Terra, finding creative solutions, showing mercy to enemies, those same approaches are working in diplomacy too. Jake felt a surge of pride, not just for Dr. Grant, but for all of humanity. They had proven themselves in battle, yes, but they were also proving themselves in peace, showing that human qualities like creativity, adaptability, and compassion had value throughout the galaxy. A message came through on Jake's communication device. He checked it and felt his smile grow wider. Kliktar is here on New Terra. She wants to meet for dinner. The Chitauri had become humanity's closest allies in the council. The 2 species cooperated on trade, research, and diplomacy. Kliktar herself had been promoted within her government, partly because of her role in supporting humanity during their crisis. She often joked that betting on humans had been the smartest gamble of her career. That evening, Jake, Phillips, Kliktar, and several other friends gathered at a restaurant overlooking the city. The establishment was run by a human woman who had married a Chitauri male, one of the first interspecies marriages in human history. Their restaurant served food from both cultures, creating fusion dishes that were becoming popular across multiple worlds. As they ate and talked, Jake looked around the table. A year ago, most of these beings would have considered humans inferior, unworthy of their attention. Now they were friends, colleagues, allies working together to make the galaxy better. Kliktar raised her glass in a toast. To humanity, she said, her translator rendering her clicking sounds into English. The species that taught the galaxy to look beyond appearance and tradition, to recognize that worth comes from character and deed. They all drank, and then Phillips raised her own glass. To all species who refuse to accept limits placed on them by others. To the dreamers and fighters who believe the galaxy can be better, and to the friends who stand with us. More toasts followed, each one celebrating different aspects of the changes that had swept through galactic society. By the end of the evening, everyone was in good spirits, telling stories and making plans for future cooperation. Later, Jake stood alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The stars shone bright above, countless worlds scattered across the vast darkness. Somewhere up there, Dr. Grant was working to prevent a war. Somewhere else, human scientists were collaborating with alien researchers on projects that would benefit all species. On Earth itself, the United Nations was hosting the first interspecies cultural festival, welcoming visitors from across the galaxy. Ryan Blake joined him on the balcony, 2 glasses in hand. He offered one to Jake, and they stood together in comfortable silence for a moment. "Do you ever think about that day in the council chamber?" Ryan asked. "When they declared us inferior?" Jake nodded. "Every day. It felt like the end of everything. Like all our dreams had been destroyed in an instant. But it wasn't the end," Ryan said. "It was the beginning. If the Viridians hadn't challenged us, we might have joined the council as just another member species. We would have been accepted, but we wouldn't have changed anything. Instead, we proved what humans can do when pushed to our limits." Jake agreed. "And we did it in a way that made others want to be like us, not fear us." Ryan took a sip of his drink. "I heard Ambassador Sarek is coming tomorrow for the unveiling ceremony. The Viridians are really trying to make amends." Jake nodded. The Viridian Empire had undergone significant reforms in the past year. Their new government was more democratic and less focused on conquest. They had shared advanced technology with humanity and several other species. The relationship between humans and Viridians, once hostile, was now one of mutual respect. Tomorrow they would unveil a monument in the council chambers, commemorating the events that had changed the galaxy. The design had been chosen through a competition open to all species. The winning entry showed 2 hands clasped together, one human and one Viridian, symbolizing reconciliation and cooperation. The inscription on the monument would read, "Strength is not measured in weapons or age, but in wisdom, courage, and the choice to build rather than destroy. Dedicated to all species who dare to prove the impossible possible." "You know what I think the real victory was?" Jake said after a while. "Not the battle. Not even joining the council. The real victory was showing mercy when we could have chosen revenge." Ryan considered this. "You mean offering the ceasefire to Vexthar?" "That and everything after. We could have demanded punishment for the Viridians. We could have asked for territory or resources as compensation. Instead, we asked for reforms that would help everyone. We proved that humanity thinks about more than just itself. That's what made others trust us," Ryan agreed. "They saw that we weren't just fighting for ourselves. We were fighting for a principle, the idea that every species deserves a fair chance." A young officer approached, saluting Jake. "Admiral, we just received a distress call from a research station in the Delta sector. A solar flare has damaged their systems. They have Viridian, Chitauri, and human scientists on board." Jake immediately switched into command mode. "How long until we can reach them?" 4 hours at maximum speed. Get the Valiant and 2 support ships ready for immediate departure. Contact the Viridian and Chitauri embassies. Let them know we're responding. And tell the research station help is on the way." Jake turned to Ryan. "Duty calls." Ryan grinned. "Wouldn't have it any other way. I'll prep the crew." As they headed to the spaceport, Jake thought about how different this mission was from the one a year ago. Then they had been preparing to face an enemy alone. Now they were part of a galactic community working together to help anyone in need, regardless of species. The Valiant lifted off into the night sky, its engines glowing bright. Inside, human and alien crew members worked side